our voices. Oh no, Pastor Nkole said to Sister Kotrida to say, next week you need to go to India. She's going to India. No, did you hear why we were discussing about India? So if we hear and we don't interpret it correctly, we get wrong results. So there is it's very important that we read the Word of God and interpret it correctly. And then we apply it in our lives. What God has said must be applied in our lives. Point number 6 on page 6. You can pass this to Brother Changa. On page 6, number 6, there are a number of Bibles that we have. We need to use the dictionary. Some Bibles have got glossary words at the end of the book, and some Bibles have got maps. When was the last time that you looked at that map? Somebody said maybe the reason why believers we are getting lost as we read the Bible, we have ignored the maps. Maybe that's the reason why we are missing the roads and the ways that God has said. And also today, with the Google Maps, dictionaries, online dictionaries and maps, we can Google these places and see where things are happening. One lecturer in a Bible school was in South America, was lecturing to students, Bible students who are going to be pastors and leaders of churches. And then he was talking about what happened in Israel. And then this lady lifted up her hand and said, excuse me, sir, which part of America is that story you're telling was happening? He says, no, this was not happening in America. This was happening in the Middle East, in Israel. So there's more, it's important, get a dictionary. There's a Bible dictionary that you can buy. As believers, we are spending, we can buy things, expensive things, but we need to equip ourselves. Buy a Bible dictionary that can give you good words, Hebrew and Greek dictionary, so you can find these words. And did you know that paper print copies might be more expensive, but if you buy a Kindle version on your gadget, if it was 10 pounds paper copy, if you buy a Kindle version, you might be paying 2 pounds because you're going to save it on your gadget. So we can buy some of these things and keep them. On page 7, there are ways and methods how we can interpret the Bible. We will not dwell much there, and I'll be winding up on the Old Testament survey. Let's look at that map. Page 8, we are on page 8. The map of the exile people taken, the children of Israel. Hopefully, have you all got that map? Okay. So if you look at that map, at the bottom is Africa. If you go down bottom, you go into Egypt and Africa, but you are looking at the nation of Israel. So when you are dealing with the Bible, especially the Old Testament, you are looking at just where it says Israel and Judah. I'll explain something there. The nation of Israel was divided at one point, but just bear in mind that little map. So the land we are dealing with, a very small portion of land in Mid-East. We are dealing with just a small land which is the size of Wales. When we look at the land of Israel, or the Palestine land, or the Fertile Crescent, we are dealing with just that land there on page 8. We are dealing with just that small piece of land. So let's take a journey through the Old Testament on page 8. Journey through the Bible, Old Testament. Reading and studying the Bible, I'm sure I won't explain much there, Brother Sanga did mention, reading is different from studying. You can read and see what is written, but studying is to get to know what is it they're talking about. It's very exciting and important in the life of any Christian. When you become a man and a woman of the book, which is the Bible, you end up a great man or woman of God. So we need the word of God. It's not how many miracles we have done, or how much money we have that makes us great as believers, as Christians. It's how much we get closer to God by knowing the Word of God. There are some few keys that open the Old Testament. For example, Genesis chapter number 1, verse 1. Again, there are 66 books written about 44 different authors. And there are 39 books in the Old Testament. And the Bible is revealed word, truth, and will of God. On page 9, what are the sections of the Old Testament? It's very, very cardinal to understand. The Bible that we have in English is a little bit different from the Hebrew text of the Bible. All the books are there, 66 books, but the way they have arranged them in English is sometimes different. So when we go on to page 9, sections of the original Old Testament. The first section is the Pentateuch. Pentagon. It comes from the 5-shaped shape. That's where we get pentagon. And Pentateuch, they are referring to the first 5 books of the Hebrews. So when we are reading the Bible, when we read the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, those 5 books were written by Moses, and sometimes they refer to the law of Moses. So when Jesus says, don't you know that it is written in the law, he's referring to the 5 books, the Pentateuch, or the law, or the Torah. Also in the Bible, Jewish Bible, there is history books, and also wisdom, which is combined where we find Psalms, Proverbs, and also there are minor prophets and major prophets. But those words, theologians sometimes can confuse us. Major prophets does not mean what they did is more important. It's the volume of the books. For example, Isaiah. The prophet Isaiah wrote or gave loads of prophecies. That's why you find the book is big. So when the Jewish scholars were putting these books together, they would consider those as major, not because of what they said, but the volume of books. So the difference between minor prophets and major prophets is in the volume of the books. And you discover that in the titles of the books, the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible. For example, in English, when you look at that column on page 9, there are 2 columns: English Bible on your right, Hebrew Bible on the left. The law, the Torah, Pentateuch, they are talking about the first 5 books. And the way they give their names to these books, have we got the same page? 9.
Mine is on page 11, I think.
Oh, yours is, I think I might have printed that one before. Next time I can give you this one. It might be on page 9, where it says Pentateuch, history books, wisdom books. Yeah, so you discover that in the Hebrew Bible, the law, the Torah, Genesis, in the Hebrew Bible, because there were scrolls that were in the temples, what they used to name the books is the first sentence or first phrase of that scroll. For example, what we call in English Genesis, in Hebrew Bible it says in the beginning, Bereshith, because the first book of the Bible opens in the beginning. So in the Hebrew Bible, they take that phrase, in the beginning of things, in the beginning of creation. But in English we call it Genesis, the beginning of things, or the beginning of creation. But the difference is not much. Exodus, in the Hebrew, it just calls taking out, because Exodus simply means exit, coming out. Leviticus was written when they were in the wilderness, and all that, the Numbers in the wilderness, as they were numbering the children of Israel. Deuteronomy in Hebrew is a compound word. Deuto simply means second. Nomi, law. So it's the giving of the law second time. When the children of Israel came out of Egypt, God gave them the law at Mount Sinai. When they were about to enter the promised land, Moses reminded them of the things that God had said. So he gave them the law for the second time. And then there are prophets in the Hebrew Bible, Joshua, Judges, Samuel. They are numbered among the former prophets because they brought the historical prophecy from God's point of view. Latter prophets, find Isaiah and others in there. I think it goes on to page 10. So they are prophets. So you can compare these to the books. And in the Hebrew Bible, you discover that 1st and 2nd Samuel, they come as one book. 1st and 2nd Kings, they come as one book. Chronicles, they come as one book. But it's the same thing. And maybe I'll finish off on page 10. Maybe let's go to page 10. There are historical books, poetic books, and all that. So the literature is very, very important when we are reading the Bible for understanding's sake. You discover that every book, how did they put these Old Testament books together, and also coming to the New Testament, how did they put the New Testament together? You discover that most of the books that are in the Old Testament, when you come to the New Testament, most of them Jesus quoted these books. Remember, for example, he said, the Son of Man will be killed, buried, and after 3 days, he will come back to life, just like it happened to Jonah. A prophet more than Jonah is here. As Jonah stayed 3 days in the fish, so the Son of Man will stay 3 days in the... So they considered, when they were trying to see which books should we consider for the Bible, you discover that most of the books that are in the Bible, in the Old Testament, were quoted by Jesus Christ. So they considered them to say, this is the word of God. Some books, they moved them out of the canon or the selection of books. Jewish oral traditions. Most of the books we find in the Old Testament, some people argue, how can they remember things that happened? Do you know that it has been proved to say people that pass on oral tradition? Do you remember the stories that our parents used to tell us? Yes. In the same way, if you go back home and you ask 95-year-old grandfather, he had never sat in class, but he will tell you, when King so and so fought King so and so in 19-something, what are they doing? They are just giving you oral stories that have been passed on, and history have found out to say people were keeping this information with accuracy. They might miss one thing here and there, but in most cases those stories come back to life just as they were told. Even in history, for example, if somebody comes to look at Birmingham, they'll go into the archives, who lived where, who lived where, who did what, and they'll collect all that information, then put it in a book. So God made sure that he passed on the word to the children of Israel. Other people argue, how could Moses write about creation when he was not there? God might have spoken to him direct and gave him a revelation. So this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened. And Moses passed on to the children of Israel, and today we got the word of God. And there was a council of the Jewish people, leaders coming together to make sure that they looked at what was passed on. And let's go to page 11. Hopefully we've got that page, which looks like this. Yeah. Let's look at that. Ebenezer, you want to join your friends in the other room? Are you okay here with your friend? You want to stay here or you want to go there? You can go there. Feel free. You are most welcome. Yeah, so let's look at that page, and we'll be breaking off. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so when you look at the overview of history, when you look at that on page 11, if you look at that page, you see that there are years on top. The first column on your left is prehistory. Prehistory, when you read the Bible, Genesis chapter number 1 up to chapter number 11, you discover that they are mentioning of how God created the heavens and the earth. It is called prehistory because nobody could have been there, human being, to record what God was doing. To say, oh, day 1, yes, today God has created the heavens and earth. Oh, yes, day 2, God has done this and this. For example, people say, can you prove the Bible? Yes, I can prove the Bible. I can prove the Word of God. Because this record is more accurate than what science sometimes and archaeologists do. Sometimes they can only assume to say what happened. People can just say maybe this and that. They can sometimes just assume. But you find that Genesis chapter number 1 to 11, that is called pre-history because this can only have been revealed by God to Moses. Creation, the fall of man, the flood, Babel, and when you get all that, all those could have been passed on by God. So when you follow those arrows, the last column here is showing John the Baptist, Jesus Christ, and then if you go backwards, there is that 400 years gap, and I'll explain that. And when you go back 500, you can group those boxes, 500 years between. So from there we've got 400 years gap from the Old Testament to the New Testament. I don't know if you've noticed to say from Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, we don't hear anything until John the Baptist in the New Testament. So people have tried to look and calculate, and they have discovered to say there was 400 years gap where there is nothing that is recorded as God doing. Does it mean God stopped existing? The answer is no. There was just nothing that he was giving direct to people. If you move from that column 500 years backwards, exile of the children of Israel, that's when they went into exile. They could take them into exile. And when you look, there is another 500 which makes 1,000 here on top. Empires, David to Zedekiah. You look that column, those are the kingdoms that rose up. If you go backwards 500, which will make 1,500, you find the Exodus, the children of Israel coming out of the land of slavery in Egypt. What happened? God began to raise up prophets, starting with Moses to Samuel. There was Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Joshua takes over from Moses. Then when they came into the promised land, there was a time judges began to rule and all that. When you go backwards, you find that election, Abraham is picked by God. And then Abraham has got, they are called the patriarchs, our forefathers. There is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Isaac. Until the time that Joseph went into Egypt, from Genesis chapter number 12 to Genesis 50. When they went into exile, there's a question mark on the book of Job, because people believe to say Job might have lived very long time before these other people, so they placed the book of Job way back into Genesis. But when you look at when they went into Egypt, the Bible says Joseph, when he went to Egypt, his parents moved and also went to Egypt. The next thing you hear, that the children of Israel cried to God for God to help them. How many years did they live in Egypt? About 408 years. But there is nothing recorded in that 400 years to say now, this has happened now. They just say when the king came that did not know Joseph,